Well, hey, all you cool cats and kittens. It's Jen Lou. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everybody. How's it going? Wow, okay, this video was ridiculous. I don't even know why it took so long for it to freaking download for literally zero reason. But I just want to say hi to everybody. Hello, Kez Chick, Sam, Allie79, Molson Man, Cement Shoes. Let's see. Aussie Girl Jen. I don't want to miss anybody. Nita Butts. Hello, hello, hello. Ow. I know I saw Max 2002. Hello. I just don't want to miss anybody because you guys were all so patient to wait for me. I was annoyed with myself. Heather, whatever. Hello. Hope I didn't miss anybody. Sugar Beet, hello. Good to see you. I don't know if I said Cement Shoes. I'll say it again. Cement Shoes. Hello. I think I got everybody. I think I did. Okay, perfect. Usually that's what I do is 9 o'clock, but obviously 9:23 works best for Kez Chick. Oh, boy. All right, so are y'all ready? Everybody cross your fingers and let's hope this works because this was a long video and you know how the StreamYards likes to be playing games. So let's hope this works. All right, here we go.
To a sentencing hearing.
No, Your Honor.
Very good.
All right, it looks like it's going to work. Okay, so the way that I did this was I broke it down into sections and edited out stuff that doesn't, really mean it. Like, we don't need, it's not necessary. So in the very beginning, it's going to be attorney for, for the state speaks first, and it's going to be attorney Andrea Raymond. She is going to give, well, just watch. I don't need to tell y'all. Y'all got eyes and y'all got ears, All right, here we go.
Attorney Brown, are there any victim statements being made here in court today?
No victims themselves are going to speak. What we're going to do is Ms. Raymond's going to speak first about some letters that we have that we were going to read, and then I'll conclude our arguments.
Hey, criminality. Good to see you, babe.
So, Your Honor, Mr. Brown and I are breaking up this sentencing. I'm going to talk very briefly about the character of the defendant and then go on.
Before I forget, I'm just going to tell you guys, I don't know if anybody watched this already. Obviously, I did. But here's the deal. I don't know what happened to the cameraman today because it's like he or she, whoever's ever operating it, will be there in a minute, right? And then pay attention real close because and you tell me if you see it. It looks like somebody walks in front of the camera, but they're not like a solid person. So just watch. Maybe I was up at 4 o'clock this morning, so maybe I'm just overly tired, but here we go.
To talk about the seriousness of the offense. Mr. Brown will then talk about second half of the seriousness offense and the need to protect the public. I'm going to spend a lot of my time today talking about the victims and who they were as people. But I am going to start with talking about the character of the defendant. This PSI was kind of not your average PSI. I've often said in serious sentencings that reading PSIs is one of the most depressing things about my job, and that I really dislike it, although what it does provide is a context to crime. Almost every homicide I've prosecuted, there's been a fairly tragic backstory of the defendant. Violence, drugs, just tragedy. And you often are left with an explanation. not an excuse, but an explanation as to why a crime occurred. Why did this 18-year-old kill a 17-year-old? There's not an explanation here. Chandler grew up with a life of privilege by pretty much, I think, any sort of angle you look at it. He had 2 parents that were married and that seemed to be happily married. 2 parents that from all evidence were completely supportive. Very sort of, his dad was the den leader for Boy Scouts. His parents attended every swim meet that he had. There's absolutely no evidence of abuse whatsoever in this case. Chandler grew up with no housing insecurities. He never had to wonder where his next meal was coming from. And he was never exposed to any violence that we saw any evidence of, or even really guns. The only tragedy, if you can even call it that, it's more really a part of life that we saw that occurred to him during his childhood was he did lose his maternal grandparents. He went to good and safe schools. By all accounts, he had a supportive extended family that saw him often and a large network of family friends that considered themselves his family. He had numerous people that would drop everything to help him if it was needed. He never faced any sort of discrimination that I can find from any source. By pretty much every measure, he was a white male who had a childhood of privilege. The only potential criticism that anyone that we talked to, and we talked to well over 100 people, was that perhaps his mother babied him a little too much or was a little too doting. As I often explain to my husband, that's what mothers do. It is out of this life of privilege, this childhood, that was nearly ideal that he committed these crimes. It's also worth noting that these crimes were committed against these 2 individuals that provided this ideal childhood for him, the 2 people that took care of him. I only want to say one other thing about the character of the defendant. We certainly spent a lot of time in trial, and I don't need to belabor any points about that. But I do think it's worth noting that in all of the jail calls and messages that the detectives and Mr. Brown and I listened to, there was never even a moment where Chandler mourned his parents' death. I found that really unique. I've prosecuted a lot of cases where somebody has killed a family member, sometimes even a family member who was highly abusive to them. And there's mourning there. There's some sort of notion that they miss this person. It was interesting, in one message, somebody had told him that they just got back from his parents' memorial service, and they were sad. He suggested that they watch a slasher movie, Halloween. There was no discussion of who was at the memorial service, what they talked about, who they saw, any remembering of his parents. I just think it's notable to bring up that how significant losing your parents is to a person's life and how much it impacts them. It impacts someone, and there's been no comment, no tears. And I just think that is worth noting. You know, certainly you could take that in a couple of different ways. You could say, well, maybe they're just not an emotional person. That's certainly possible, but it also suggests a certain amount of callousness, and perhaps even lack of remorse that is worth noting. So I'm going to spend the bulk of my time talking about the seriousness of the offense. And part of what that entails is the fact that this world no longer has Bart and Krista Halderson. And so I think it's an important part to reflect on who they are. I'm going to start that by reading 2 victim impact statements. One was submitted to you earlier, but they asked that I read it out loud. The other one has not been submitted yet. It was just written today, I believe. The first victim impact statement is submitted by CAN, who's the future daughter-in-law to Bart and Krista Halderson. She's engaged to their son, Mitchell. She writes, "My life will be forever changed by the actions that occurred the week of July 1st through July 7th of 2021. I've lost my future mother and father-in-law in such a senseless and brutal way. This loss will remain with me for the rest of my life. I've personally been deeply impacted by this loss. My mental and physical health have suffered tremendously. As Mitchell and I move forward planning our wedding, each decision we make comes with a reminder of two of the most important people to us, Bart and Krista, will not be there to celebrate this special occasion with us. I've cried about their loss on multiple occasions and will continue to mourn and cry many more times. I've experienced a lot of weight loss as I was unable to eat due to the high level of stress, anxiety, and uncertainty surrounding what had happened to Bart and Krista over that long period of time. I missed work for over a month, and even now that I'm back, there are times I struggle to make it through the day. Bart and Krista were amazing people. They were there to help everyone and anyone with whatever they could. Krista had always been so welcoming to me. From the first time I met her in 2014 for Christmas to the morning that we both called her and Bart to tell them the good news that Mitchell and I were engaged in 2020, to the afternoon we spent at their home for Father's Day in June of 2021, just a week before they were killed. Krista was excited to talk with me and always made me feel at home. Bart had a wonderful sense of humor and was a great handyman. He helped us set up many things when we moved into our new home and helped teach us so that we could do it on our own next time. I miss their warm presence and their kind hearts every single day. Both Bart and Krista had so much to look forward to that they will never get to experience. They will never get to see their son get married or start a family. Mitchell and I will miss them terribly during these milestones. Holding their grandchildren, watching them play sports, hearing about school, and all those things that Bart and Krista were so excited for, they will never get to do. They loved going to wineries, breweries, concerts on the square, the farmers market, and had been dreaming about many different trips to explore Wisconsin and the United States. But again, due to their senseless murders, they will never get to experience these things. We are comforted in knowing that Chandler cannot physically hurt us. However, if he was given the opportunity for parole, I would be terrified for Mitchell and my family's safety. Given the fact that he was capable of such calculated and horrific act of murder, I do not believe my family would be safe if he were ever to be released from prison. For this reason, I believe he should not be given the chance for parole. Bart and Krista's murders have greatly impacted my life and the rest of the Halderson and Frater family lives as well. The second letter is from Kayleen Halderson, mother of Bart and Chandler's grandmother. Judge, these are my feelings about Chandler. He is my grandson. I love him even though what he did was horrific. I can't believe his parents would want him to be incarcerated for life. I'm hoping he will find a trade or a craft while there to become a productive and caring person. We hope the people in charge of that facility will feel someday he deserves a second chance in life with a possibility of parole. Chandler's grandma, Kayleen Halderson. So last week, I had the pleasure and the opportunity to meet with Krista's best friend of 38 years, Jane. And I just spoke to her very candidly, tell me about Bart and Krista. And she shared some really interesting and I think important things. She shared that Krista was a staple in her life, a sister in every way except for biological. She was the aunt to her daughters. She described Krista Halderson as having a lightness about her, that when she'd walk into the room, you would just feel happier. She was bubbly. She was a helper, wanted to always fix people's problems. Krista was described by her boss at work as the work mom for everything. She was the person you went to if you needed Tylenol, a hug, or a pep talk. She listened to people and cared about people. She went out of her way to lift people up. She was the type of person that you would feel happier, that would make you feel happier after you talked to her. The title that was most important to Krista was that of mom. That was her identity. Being a mom was her purpose in life. She was the type of mom that had bins where she saved her kids' Legos for the grandchildren. She had meticulous bins in her basement, each one perfectly labeled with no dust on them, that were organized and labeled their awards, their Eagle Scout journey, and various paraphernalia and photos. Jane said Krista was a joy and a blessing. I not only talked to Jane about Bart Halderson, but also his family over the last several weeks. Bart was quieter. He worked hard and he provided for his family. He was up for quite a big promotion right before his murder. He liked the outdoors, nature, fishing, and his family. He was redoing and in the process of renovating his entire house, nearly down to the studs. He had recently built a brand new dining table made of pure wood, which he had hoped that they would use for the rest of their lives, celebrating the holidays with the grandkids. He was close with his older brother, Brett, and his parents, who are both still alive. Bart is described as generous, doing little things to take care of people. Jane pointed out that every time he was in Milwaukee, he would always take her daughters out when they were in college for a free meal with their Uncle Bart. One other thing that actually one of our detectives pointed out today is in the course of their employment, they read through a whole bunch of text messages from all sorts of people. And they were really struck about how nice Bart and Krista were. They really didn't say a bad word about anyone, not even to each other. They were kind, respectful. They texted often about worrying about this son or that son and various things. They were loving towards each other. Bart and Krista, of course, will now not see their older son get married. They won't be present for their grandchildren. They won't get to experience the retirement that they really had been planning for decades. And they didn't get to say goodbye to anyone. Multiple people, when we talked to them about Bart and Krista, said, you know, if they would have found out about Chandler's lies and his deception, they would have been upset. They would have been. But they also would have worked with him to get him back on the right track. They were sure of this. More than one person had made a statement like this to us, that Bart and Krista would have continued to be the supportive parents that their entire track record had showed that they were. I just want to point out one more thing about the seriousness of the offense. The victimization that was caused here extends well beyond Bart and Krista Halderson. Because of Chandler's actions, his grandparents had to bury a child. His brother lost his entire nuclear family overnight. The entire family is forever altered. People who were generous to Chandler, such as his girlfriend and her family, have had their lives completely uprooted as well. Bart and Krista's friends will again never get to enjoy them. And numerous people have guilt because they wonder, were there red flags that I missed? Could I have prevented this? Chandler's actions have caused uncalculable amounts of trauma for dozens of people. Your Honor, as you craft a sentence, I'm asking that you please consider all this trauma as part of the seriousness of this offense in creating a just sentence.
Okay. Now, that was hard because it's sad to, you know, how much trauma he put everybody through. And I liked that she mentioned Dulce and Cress because, I mean, yeah, thumbs down too. I mean, listen, I'm not picky, just some kind of interaction would be great. You know, I don't judge. But I just feel like I thought it was important that she convey that because, you know, although Cress and Dulce were not like directly, related. And I don't even think they really knew Bart and Krista Halderson all that well. But what he did to that farm, I mean, he desecrated that farm with what he did. He ruined it forever. It's tainted forever. You know what I mean? And I thought it was really good that she put that in there because that's important. Now, I will say this. I will, and not even on purpose. It'll be on an accident. It'll be random, and who knows when it's coming. But yes. I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, I know what I was going to say. I think it's interesting, though, that first of all, I think it's interesting that his grandmother asked for the possibility of parole. And I also think that it's interesting that it is Mitchell's fiance that they read her impact statement and not Mitchell's. I'm fairly certain that Mitchell probably did write one, but Schmida and I were talking about this, and I thought that he probably wouldn't want his read aloud. I think he would want his private. You know what I'm saying? So yeah. Now, when Deputy District Attorney William Brown comes on, just wait. He fed Narito Chazzle Dazzle for filth. All right, here we go.
I'm going to comment on some of the other sentencing factors. I'm going to start with the submission by the defense, which I thought was well put together and well written, and included an article, a law review article that I read with great interest. Obviously, it concerns what I do for a living, and it's something I should think about.
It's spring break for Schmida too, so she's spending time with her family, and Mo is working. Yeah, she'll pop in. She should have her break shortly, so she should be here in a little bit.
One thing that, before I start, I do want to thank both the defense attorneys. I think they've done a hard job, a job that they've sworn to do and dedicated their lives to doing as being defense attorneys and public defenders. And I've appreciated their presence, and they've been nothing but respectful and honorable in their task. And it was a hard job in this case. But speaking especially to their submission today, Attorney Dorrell said something that stuck out to me as absolutely true, which is one of the lines, which is, it seems that people, I'm quoting, paraphrasing here, believe that today is a foregone conclusion as to what the outcome is. And I, like her, I don't know that that's true. And I certainly don't think it's true with you, Judge. I'll tell you that as a prosecutor, I often prosecute homicides. And that's an unfortunate reality of being a prosecutor in a city. People commit the crime of intentional homicide. These hearings happen a great deal. My job is obviously to convict people if I believe they're guilty, and here, obviously, of course, I believe that, and I did that. But when it comes to sentencing, the questions are not simply in my gut. Do I feel like this is a bad guy? Do I personally have some vendetta or reason to want to push for a specific sentence? My role is to examine the legal factors and to employ my role as the executive branch's representative in these hearings as thoughtfully and as compassionately as I can. I have to recognize, and I think all prosecutors should recognize as the representative of the executive branch at a sentencing, especially a sentencing in which we're talking about an imprisonment of the defendant that could be many decades, that nothing should be a foregone conclusion, that we should approach this with a level of analysis and questioning and of skepticism, that we do some of the most important questions in our lives, professionally or personally. And I'll tell you and Mr. Halderson and the community that I've done that. I've thought a great deal, as has Ms. Raymond, as the detectives. Mr. Halderson's being sentenced to life in prison today. This hearing is about whether he's ever going to be granted parole or eligible for parole, excuse me. And that's a challenging decision for everyone to make. And I'll let you know that I have not entered this process in thinking about what the state's recommendation should be, with that being a foregone conclusion. Luckily, the law tells me what I'm supposed to think about when I'm considering what the executive branch of government is going to represent as its opinion in this case. It tells me that I should consider the gravity of the offense, the need to protect the public, and the rehabilitative needs of Mr. Halderson, amongst other factors, mitigating factors and things of that sort. But those are the three that generally are focused upon. They're called the galleon factors here in Wisconsin. That's supposed to guide us in our thought process. And I'll walk through those and my thought process in making my recommendation. I'll start with the rehabilitative needs of Mr. Halderson. I have no idea what they are. Mr. Halderson has an absolute right to not participate in these proceedings, and he is not being sentenced today. And I'm not asking you to sentence him based on his non-participation in either the PSI or a trial. Of course, those are his constitutional rights, or even today. That being said, as Ms. Raymond said, almost always in a sentencing hearing for a homicide or even lesser crimes, we have some understanding as players in the criminal justice system of the underlying causes of someone's problems, the root causes. Frequently, it's substance abuse. Frequently, it's mental illness. Frequently, it's inability to control anger and other behavioral problems that have manifested themselves throughout someone's life. You probably are wondering, and I'll tell you, it's been thoroughly investigated of whether there were any red flags that anyone missed. Was Mr. Halderson engaged in bad behavior as a youth? Was he harming animals? Was he harming people? None of that is true that we can tell. He seemed to be a pretty normal kid with a pretty normal life who did a pretty abnormal thing as he turned 23. You don't know what his rehabilitative needs are, and that's a challenge. The reason we focus on that is this idea in the criminal justice system that we can rehabilitate almost everyone. And I'll say, I think that to be true. I really do. The vast majority of people who are charged with this crime of first-degree intentional homicide, as grievous as it might be and as difficult as it might be sometimes for the victims to hear it, they are people who can be rehabilitated, that we can address that root underlying cause of mental illness or substance abuse, and they can emerge from the state prison system. Perhaps not a perfect person, but a better person. And society can have some comfort, and we can all go to bed at night and sleep soundly knowing that we've done what we can to try to prevent some future harm from occurring because we've addressed that identifiable problem. You don't have that. And if you don't have that, I'm not sure how much you can consider that factor. And the law is very clear. When you're addressing the galleon factors, you don't have to weigh them up equally. You have to consider them all. But I would pose to the court that that's not a factor that you should ultimately consider a great deal, because I don't know what information the court could rely on in determining that there are some identifiable and fixable rehabilitative needs of Mr. Halderson. Next, the court has to consider the protection of the public. And here's where the court has to probably give a great weight.
Oh, I'm still here, Chick. I just wanted to make sure you guys heard all of this because let me say this. This district attorney is, if he's coming off as irritated and annoyed, he is. And the reason that he's irritated and annoyed is there's a couple of reasons. One is because Chandler Chazzle Dazzle refused to participate in the pre-sentencing investigation. And see, the drawback to that would be if you were trying to get the district attorney on your side, the prosecutor, and at least recommend the possibility of parole. Because, just because you have the possibility of parole doesn't mean you're going to get it, but just knowing that it's there, right? You would want to participate in that. And he can't argue mitigating factors or recommend oh, you're Jen. I keep forgetting there's two of us in here now. Sorry. But anyway, yeah, he's mad. He's mad about it because he wouldn't participate. And then on Friday, which was was it the 14th of February? March? No, that can't be right. Hold on. Let me look at the calendar. Whatever date Friday was. Maybe that was not the calculator, Jen. The calendar. Good Lord. Can't even click on my own apps. Okay. So we're in March. So the 11th of March, which was last Friday, he decides to have his attorneys file so that he didn't have to be in court. He didn't want to participate in this. So, yeah, that's why he's annoyed. Very annoyed. All right, here we go.
To this factor. Mr. Halderson,
He's
by all
big mad.
accounts, chose to commit the crime of first-degree intentional homicide twice on a single day because he was caught lying about where he was working and going to school, or perhaps just where he was going to school. It was uncomfortable, probably, that he was caught. It probably wasn't an experience he was looking forward to in dealing with the repercussions of that. But those kind of inconveniences and uncomfortable situations are constantly present in life. Every one of us in this courtroom have dealt with bad situations in life. Every one of us have left work one day thinking, man, I really don't want to go home tonight because I did something and I'm going to have to talk about it. Every one of us here has probably walked into work one day thinking, boy, I don't really want to walk into my supervisor's office and got to talk about that. Life is full of inconveniences. Life is full of being uncomfortable. The difference between everyone else in this room and Mr. Halderson is all of us have owned up to that. All of us walked into those rooms, walked into our front door. All of us have addressed those situations, whether it be comfortable or uncomfortable, whether it lead to the loss of relationships or respect or money. We've all addressed them. You walk in, you take your lumps, you leave. But when faced with, in the grand scheme of things, a minor inconvenience in his life, Mr. Halderson chose to commit the crime of first-degree intentional homicide 2 times. And then over the course of several days, chose to cut up those people's bodies and spread them around the state. Chose to lie to the police, concoct a bizarre story, lead his family down this road of believing that there was just some hope somewhere out there that Bart and Krista were alive. Because he got caught in a minor inconvenience. I don't know how you protect the public from someone like that. I don't know how any of us would have any comfort in thinking that Mr. Halderson would ever be in a better place to make those decisions more wisely. It's even more compounded and perhaps aggravated in the legal sense by the fact that no one saw this coming. He is someone who is able to perhaps have this capability or perhaps have these thoughts in life and inserts himself into relationships, social situations, his family, without anyone wondering, is this a safe person to be around? Sometimes in court for homicide sentencings, the guy next to us is a history a mile long of violent crime and is willing to talk about it. And you wonder when people are even around that person. It seems like a dangerous guy. Part of the risk of Chandler is he doesn't look like a dangerous guy. He's packaged up into like a normal middle-class kid.
Hey, Angry
Was able
Mimi,
to
welcome back.
fool everyone. Not only fool everyone about these crazy lies about work and school and activities, but fool everyone into believing that he was a safe person to be around, that he was trustworthy, that he wasn't going to, not exaggerating the facts, shoot you in the back, because that's in fact what happened. Someone in Mr. Halderson's shoes with his mindset can never be safely in this community. His willingness to solve
No, it's not covering
the minor
Chazel's face.
inconveniences of
You
life
can't see it from
with
here.
brutal
I can make it
violence
a little
can never
smaller
be
if you guys want
mitigated
here.
in our community. As long as he
See,
bleeds,
it will.
he will
It
be a
doesn't
risk.
make a difference.
He
I
will be
mean,
a
I can
risk
remove
because
it.
he will
Hold
suffer
on.
more minor inconveniences, as will we all. And lastly, the court has to consider the gravity of the offense. Ms. Raymond talked a good deal about that. Part of that is considering the people he hurt.
See,
Not only his parents, who by all accounts were loving and caring, but the community, their character as people. Gravity of the offense is sometimes called retribution in some systems, and I'll note that retribution is an appropriate thing to consider in law. At times, it's part of the gravity of the offense. But here, there is no more grave offense. The crime of first-degree intentional homicide is as serious as it gets. Committing it twice is even more serious. And committing it against the people who are you're supposed to love the most is beyond comprehension for many in our community. There's an interesting quote as I prepared for today. I was looking at some cases, just trying to look into the mindset of other judges as they've considered these factors and the concept of punishment in the law. Justice Stewart, a while back in Furman versus Georgia, wrote, The instinct for retribution is part of the nature of man, and channeling that instinct in the administration of criminal justice serves an important purpose in
Hey,
promoting
Renee
the
New.
stability of a society governed by law.
Hey, Lily.
There was another case in the late
Good to
40s.
see you guys.
It was
Welcome,
Williams
welcome,
versus New York.
welcome.
Retribution is no longer the dominant objective of criminal law, but it is neither forbidden nor one inconsistent with our respect for the dignity of man. When we talk about the gravity of the offense, it's a consideration. The court gets to decide what that means. But you should consider that in my mind, in my experience as a prosecutor in this county, as a citizen of this state, I've never heard of a crime more serious. I've never heard of a crime more brutal. Mr. Halderson's mere presence in our community, the fact that he did any of this, has ripped apart the fabric of our community. The idea that someone can live amongst us with no warning signs and commit such heinous acts should scare everybody, and it sure as hell scared everybody here. No one who's interacted with Mr. Halderson will ever be the same. For whatever reason he decided to do it, whatever justification he can come up with in his own mind, whether it be today or down the road in many years, nothing will ever explain it. His actions in July of this year were evil. And for this generation and at this time, Mr. Halderson is the personification of evil in our community. He can work the rest of his life at trying to earn back the respect and trust and love of maybe some of his family, and I hope he does that. But that's a different thing than what's going on here today. Our question is whether Mr. Halderson should ever be released from prison, and if so, when should he have that opportunity to ask?
Hey, Recliner
It's
Detective.
my
Good to
position that he
see
should
you.
never be
Aaron
released from
Gobra.
prison.
I don't think I said
That
that
the
right. I
mere
need Sam to tell
possibility
me how to say it.
Of his return to our community would shock the conscience of almost every citizen.
Oh, I
of this
know,
community.
Lily. I'm waiting.
It would
Just
depreciate
wait.
the seriousness of what he's done. It would cause extreme angst, animosity, probably for many, to even feel that that's a possibility. We don't have a more serious punishment, but sometimes it's appropriate. And in this case, it's the state's position, it is my position, it is my recommendation that Mr. Halderson spend the remainder of his life in prison, that he not be eligible for parole at any point. Again, there is no more serious crime. Mr. Halderson has to come to terms with what he's done, and I hope he does someday. But that doesn't mean he should ever be released. And I ask that you not let him be released. Thank you.
I just want to take a moment. You see, he ain't playing with no chazzle dazzle. He's had enough. And he's right. I think the most compelling argument for him to get life without the possibility of parole is the fact that there's two things. One, that nobody saw this coming. Hello, Chris Watts. Two, the fact that, let's be honest, why did he really do this? What was the catalyst? Because he was about to get caught lying about a job and school. Like, that couldn't be worked out. I mean, worst case scenario, what would have happened? Maybe Bart and Krista said, all right, take your crap and get out of our house. He had a girlfriend who had her own place. He could have stayed there. It's not like he was going to be homeless. You know what I mean? And that is why, yeah, Ezra's next. No, babe, I wanted to finish up Kezchik with Chazzle Dazzle, the Chandler Halderson case, because we all watched that trial together, and this is his sentencing phase, and I wanted everybody to watch it together. And yeah. No, they're not. No, life sentences are they can vary. The only time that you know for sure that you're not going to walk out of the prison on your own under your own power is if you get life without parole. But life can mean a lot of different sentences. It can. Yeah. So yeah, this is a crazy one, but here comes Attorney Vera. Bullshit. All right, here we go.
You often are left with an explanation, not an excuse, but an explanation as to why a
Oh my God, why did it do that? I don't appreciate you doing that at all. Stupid thing.
Community. There,
Skip. Oh, wait. Nope, he's still talking.
On this regard?
I will, yes.
Go right ahead.
Thank you.
Sorry, you
Earlier
guys.
this week, Attorney Dorrell did file a sentencing memorandum, which we know Your Honor has read and considered. We stand by that submission, and we just have a couple more additions to add right now. We've talked about family and the seriousness of this case and the public.
Exactly. He could have done
And sentencing
anything.
is a very intimate matter, especially in a case like this where it is a family situation.
Because
I
nobody
bring that
saw
up
this
because At the
coming.
end of the day, regardless of what
Those
happens
are the
today
scary
in this
ones.
courtroom, no one is going to be happy. No one is going to run out of this courtroom feeling like justice is served. No one is going to run out of this courtroom feeling good. This family is going to always have this situation, is going to be touched by this situation, and Chandler himself is always going to be touched by this moment, which makes it a very intimate matter. But it also has become a very public affair. Regardless of what you do today, the outside world, the community, the public, however you want to address it, is going to be not happy. There are going to be people that, if you decide to sentence Chandler to life without parole, they're still going to be mad. They're going to ask for Wisconsin to bring the death penalty back and to apply it retroactively to him. And if you sentence him without or with parole, there are people that are going to be mad because it's too lenient. I bring this up because, again, it's what happens here today is not a win-win or a lose-lose situation. It is what it is, and it's difficult. What I do want to focus on today is just what we're asking for, which we are asking for the possibility of parole. And I want to stress that it is a possibility. It is not a guarantee. It is not something that is going to happen, even if Your Honor says today that there's a possibility that it could happen. According to the statute, 302.114 of the Wisconsin statutes, it's a process. If Your Honor finds him eligible for parole today, he would have to go through this process that can start no earlier than 90 days before the eligibility date. It's a process that would require a petition to the court. It would perhaps be Your Honor or someone else, but it would be a court petition. It would be something submitted to the district attorney's office as well. They are allowed to give their 2 cents on whether it should be granted or it should not be granted. Your Honor is allowed to make the decision on its face if it's going to grant parole or not. There is the opportunity for victims and those impacted by this case to give their 2 cents as well. There's an opportunity for a hearing where at that point, Mr. Halderson would have to show that he is worthy of parole. Not only that, but it's not a situation where he can continue to apply and apply. Your Honor, whoever the court is at that time, would have the opportunity to say, you are not allowed to apply anymore. I'm going to give you one more chance. I'm going to give you 2 more chances. It's not something that he would have to continue to ask for year after this eligibility date, should Your Honor grant it. So it's not a process that is a guarantee. It is simply a process that we are asking that you allow for the possibility of that process happening. And I cannot stress that enough. I cannot stress enough how all we are asking for today is for the possibility of this man to show you that he is redeemable. Attorney Brown brought up points about rehabilitation and how and everything that we've seen. And yes, there was a lot of evidence and a lot of discovery in this case. There may not be something to point out right away that is, quote unquote, a rehabilitative process. There isn't any kind of substance abuse issue, none of that. But to be perfectly fair, and whether you want to call him a kid, a young man, a young adult, Chandler is young. He just turned 24. There are a lot of growing up. There's a lot of adulting that he's going to miss out on, that he's going to have to do in the institution, that ultimately is going to affect who he becomes in the future. Most of us get the opportunity to do that around our family, with our community, whatever it is. And he's going to have to do that in custody. But I bring that up because there's certain things about my own childhood, about my own life that I didn't really
did too,
understand
Max.
until I was later in my late 20s. That affected how I was as a person in my early 20s. So it's easy to come up now and say that there's no rehabilitation that's needed here, but we just don't know that. So ultimately, it boils down to what Your Honor believes is an appropriate, fair, and just option, given everything, given all the galleon factors that the state has mentioned and that we have mentioned in our sentencing memorandum. And it's a delicate balance. If Your Honor believes that sentencing is purely punitive, purely an issue of punishment, then the only option is life without parole. But if Your Honor believes that it is a delicate combination of punishment and rehabilitation, redemption, if you will, then there's only one option, and that is the option of life with parole. As far as when that eligibility comes to play, we leave that up to Your Honor. You know the case, you've been here with the trial. That date we leave up to you. But we are asking that you do provide Chandler with the opportunity to show to Your Honor that he is redeemable in the future. And that's all we're asking for today, life with parole. Thank you.
Y'all just wait.
Make a statement.
And thank you for doing that. That has changed. Mr. Halderson would like to give a statement to Your Honor.
You may remove your mask if you wish. I believe the conditions in the jail are and very good as far as the pandemic. So if you want to speak without your mask and Attorney Dorrell's comfortable with that, you could.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I would only ask that you read slowly, simply because my court reporter has to take down what you're saying, and sometimes we read faster than we mean to.
Your Honor, I want to take this opportunity to state my intent to appeal my convictions. If there are any lawyers listening and willing to take on my appeal, take a moment to please reach out to me. It's not that I do not have feelings. It's that I was warned to not show them due to the scrutiny of this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So first of all, let me say, Attorney Vera, I really think that you need to stop being the last one to speak on behalf of your client. That was literally terrible. Now, I understand it's chazzle dazzle. Okay, I get it. He's annoying. He annoyed me too. More than annoyed, he angered me. But that closing, that I don't even know what it's called, was terrible. This woman could not convince me to eat a piece of toast if I was starving. And then here comes Chazzle Dazzle with his whole ass infomercial. You have a moment to speak, and you're not timed. He could have said more, but instead, he uses it as an infomercial. Who's going to want to? I mean, look, everybody has a right to appeal, and he has his rights. I get it, right? And hey, Tracy Walker, good to see you. He has his rights, and I respect everybody's rights. Okay, but but what he did was foul, and that wasn't the time or the place. It was gross, disgusting. But Attorney Vera, I'm sorry. You seem like a cool chick. You don't want to take accountability for burps. It's cool, but you hollered out bullshit in the middle of an open court in your closing argument. So you get a couple of points for that. But you literally concede to the charges and the state's recommendation that justice isn't served. What are you talking about? who doesn't feel that justice is served? Even if he were going to get paroled, people would be upset about it, but it's a chance at parole, as you so repeatedly and less than eloquently pointed out. It's a possibility. Like, not even, hey, thanks, Mima, for, asking the judge to take it easy on me. None of that. No. Just, hey, if there's any attorneys out there, call me. Like, come on, Chazzle Dazzle. Disgusting. Disgusting. And you guys know how I feel. I feel, that people, there are times when I do think there are cases where the person is redeemable. This ain't that, though. I have severe doubts. All right, here we go. Now, Judge Highland is about to just... I just love this man. All right, here we go. Look at his curl is really on... Well, this is a picture, but if you look at the trial or the sentencing footage, he's got a good curl going too today as well for court.
The court always tends to make a number of observations at sentencing hearings that are contested and which carry a good deal of weight, and I'm not going to depart from that process today. I first think it's important to acknowledge that the trial and the process within this case that brings us here today was the united effort of a number of people. And first and foremost, I want to recognize again the jurors, but not just those 12 people that rendered the verdicts here, but those alternates, those people that responded to the summons, especially given the time of year that this occurred, and the concerns that were rife regarding individual health. We, as by necessity, inconvenienced a number of citizens, and in the end, when I spoke to them, they had no regrets about their service. And that is because they understood that under our system, that is vital. And they understood that they had a duty to perform once selected. So I thank them once again. I want to thank the bailiff staff who, throughout those weeks of trial, worked incredibly well in assisting the parties, the court, the witnesses, and the media. I want to thank the prosecution because I thought that the case that they presented was done efficiently, economically, but most importantly, with due deference to the nature of the evidence and the need to present that evidence in a manner which honored the people who were lost. We had a number of lay witnesses that came to court to testify. I assume that they all would rather have been somewhere else, but they all came willingly and testified here, and I appreciated their participation and the time that it took for them, again, under the circumstances, both as far as health and the nature of the proceedings and their testimony. Counsel mentioned that this crime caused a rip in our community. If there's one thing that's a positive coming out of this, I think that it is a demonstration to our community of the pride we should feel in our law enforcement, the pride we should feel in how they investigated this case and how they presented the evidence in this case. It was, well, I honestly think it put Dane County on the map through both the Justice Department efforts and the efforts of our local Sheriff's Department and other law enforcement agencies involved. It was quite incredible. I also want to finally say something about the fact that at every trial, just about, I hear defense attorneys speaking to jurors in voir dire about the fact that The defendant has a right to a trial. The defendant does not have to prove anything. The defendant does not have to testify. Sometimes the counsel will go to the extent of saying, we don't have to do anything. It's the state's burden. It's the state's responsibility to carry the case forward, to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. And you should find the defendant not guilty if you believe they failed in that. Attorneys Dorrell and Vera carried out their constitutional duty in this case efficiently. And I don't want to say too much more because of mention already about questions about the review of what they did in representing Mr. Halderson. But I wouldn't be remiss if I did not say that their actions, and I agree with Mr. Brown in this respect, that their actions at trial advanced Mr. Halderson's constitutional right to require the state to prove its case, and did so in a professional and efficient manner such that I find that they served their role in this process admirably. I'm very passionate about our system. And so let me move on to the points in this proceeding at which I need to be dispassionate. And I need to be dispassionate because as the person sitting in judgment, I have to try and achieve a proper analysis of the sentencing goals based upon the information and evidence put forward and what the legislature has determined to be the appropriate sentences, at least as far as maximums, mandatory minimums, if any, and here, obviously, as addressed by everyone, the determination of whether there should be any eligibility for parole in the future. Technically extended supervision, but it's easier just to say parole. I've had the benefit of observing everything at the trial, whether it occurred before the jury or not. I've had the benefit of reviewing all the pre-trial submissions by the parties. I've had the benefit of the pre-sentence investigation and the materials submitted by victims, orally by the state in writing, by the defense, and orally here today. And Mr. Halderson has exercised his constitutional right as well. I don't know the victims. I did not know the victims. I know people like them, I'm privileged to say, and I know and can understand the empty space that this crime has left. I can empathize. I can only partially understand the feelings because I haven't lost people in my family through such a manner or had a violation by a member of the family causing such loss, but everyone in this room has a mother and a father. Everyone has siblings, if they're fortunate, and everyone can understand the loss that the Halderson family, extended as it is, and their friends, and this community feel for their loss. It is tragic. It is tragic. It is something which will take decades for some to heal. I hope not that long, but healing may never come for some. One does not know. And I hope that no one is coming here for that healing. This procedure provides closure only of this legal part of the matter. What people can do in their own lives to address their loss is what they must do themselves and amongst others. But I do want you to know that this court honors your loss, honors the people who died, and approaches this sentencing here, weighing that gravity of that offense as one of those things which must be weighed in determining whether or not Mr. Halderson should ever be eligible for parole, as the life sentences I must impose are predetermined by the legislature. It is true that rehabilitation is a factor that must be considered, and Attorney Brown's point is is well noted, that I'm not certain that anyone has identified rehabilitative needs, but those may arise over time, depending upon an individual's receptiveness and willingness to participate in self-examination or diagnosis or other steps which our criminal justice system utilizes to try and determine how to fix something, whether it's a substance abuse issue or an anger issue or something that is only amenable to treatment by medication or intensive therapy. Some people, I believe, can't be fixed. I have no basis to know whether Mr. Halderson fits into any of those categories, other than I think it's fairly clear here that nothing was identified in his 23, 24 years of life up to this point, except for his actions in July. And to an extent, his actions over the year plus leading up to that, where he was deceiving his family and his friends. The gravity of the offense is as serious as it could be, and I must not overlook, of course, the steps taken to hide the crime. The steps taken which, if one ponders it, certainly makes the crime even worse. If you could say that the murder of your parents is something that could be made worse. I've tried, even though I've had to examine carefully the evidence, not to think about it. I've tried not to think about how or what steps were taken or how these things even took place. I don't wish to engage in that speculation at sentencing, but I recognize that the jury found Mr. Halderson guilty of mutilating both bodies, hiding both bodies, and presenting a story to law enforcement to try and lead them on a completely different path than what had actually occurred. And that he took steps in those actions which really robbed those people of dignity. But fortunately, their dignity is in whole here in these people that remember them, these people that are here today because of them. I appreciated learning more about them, and my condolences go to every member of their family. There's no foregone conclusions in sentencing. I've learned that since my time on the bench. I've learned that each case is different. Each case demands an individual examination. And sometimes I will confess I sit down not knowing what I'm going to do or not even certain which direction I'm leading. So I appreciate all of the statements made by counsel here and in writing, recognizing that the determination doesn't come until this point and nothing is foregone as far as a conclusion. This is the third individual for which I've had to make this determination. And similar to ADA Raymond's comments, I've had to sentence a host of other people up to this crime, where you can observe a lot in the background of the individual that you end up wishing hadn't been the case, because they might not have come to the point if they had had a better foundation. It is to Barton Krista's credit the foundation Mr. Halderson enjoyed. And it does
Hey,
not explain
Rubberhead,
what
good to
happened
see
here.
you.
And as everyone has discussed, there may be the ability to have rehabilitation throughout some course of time. And that's why the defense requests that that be kept in mind as to the determination of eligibility for parole. But in all honesty, I must say that as a wiser judge indicated to me once, you should sentence people not because of your anger, if indeed you're fearful of them, and not utilize the same standards for both. I cannot conceive of a way to fulfill my duty to protect the public that I serve were I to perceive that at some point in time, an individual who committed these crimes should be released back into that public. I cannot grant to Mr. Halderson the generosity of spirit and empathy that his grandmother has for him. Empathy which his own parents would surely have had were he just owned up to what he had deceived them about. I cannot say to the community here in this room or at large in this county that Mr. Halderson should have the ability to be reviewed and considered for release back into our community at any point, despite his young age at this point in his life. The gravity of these offenses and the need to protect the public outweigh the potential that there could be that at some future point he should have presence among us. Now, that is not to say that he may not have the possibility of presence as a member of his family in the future. That is up to those folks and he, and that's mentioned in the defense memorandum regarding a hope that someday there might be a reconstruction.
Because Max, he's being held at the jail. It's not gone to prison yet. They wait for sentencing, right? So he'll probably end up being shipped to Dodge if you want to know the truth. But each jail has a different color jumpsuit. They don't all use orange.
Of a relationship. That's all well and good. I would wish that for anyone, because I don't like telling his grandmother that I'm not able to give her the relief that she's asking for here out of her love for her grandson. I cannot do that. I have to, for this sentence, ensure that the only time Mr. Halderson comes back into the community is to have the privilege of a burial that he denied his parents. And so on counts 1 and 5, per statute, I sentence him to life in prison, and pursuant to section 973.014, sub 1G3, I find that he is not to be eligible for extended supervision during that course. The sentences on the other counts, given 2 life sentences, become rather superfluous, to say the least, but at the same time, I absolutely acknowledge that we may be in a completely different position here had he committed the acts of homicide, but then stopped and took other steps to accept responsibility and sought forgiveness of everyone. Because what happens with a weapon in a moment of panic is different than what happened over those 48 to 72 hours. The events of which I don't wish to think of or consider once again, having listened to the evidence and observed the testimony and the physical evidence. So to make this quite simple, I will impose maximum terms concurrent to each other and concurrent to counts 1 and 5 on each of the other counts within the information of which the verdict convicted Mr. Halderson. I do believe that by imposing the maximum, I'm recognizing the severity of those individual acts, but there is a life sentence here, so making them consecutive does not undermine the gravity of that, given the maximum penalty involved. I determined, by my calculation, 253 days of credit that the judgment of conviction would reflect from July 8th, 2021 until yesterday's date. And I will waive the court cost assessments and surcharges on each count based upon indigence, the balance on each of the victim witness fee to be payable during the course of his confinement. Is there any restitution being sought?
No, Your Honor.
Then I will enter an order for zero restitution at this time. I don't have to address conditions of extended supervision, except to the point that there's an extended supervision component of the sentences on the other counts. So I would adopt the recommendations of the department on page 24 of the pre-sentence at those. Although I recognize that extended supervision is denied under this sentence, so that point is moot. Attorney Brown or Raymond, did I overlook anything in passing judgment?
No.
Attorney Vera or Doral, did I overlook anything other than addressing post-conviction?
No.
Mr. Halderson, you have the absolute right to seek an appeal. You have 20 days within which to start that process. That's through filing a notice of intent. I believe that we have on file the notice that you understand and have been given notice of that right, and most importantly, of that deadline. Your signature's on that document. That'll be placed within the file here. I thank everyone for being here today. We are adjourned. Thank you.
Well, there you have it. That's what he gets. So, yeah. I don't see that he actually has, I don't know what he would base his appeal on, but he had a really fair trial, and there may have been some errors during the trial, because there always are, but like nothing that's going to give him another trial. So, yeah. Okay, so now we're going to head on over to see what old Ezra's doing. And remember, why are you, I didn't push play. Calm down, YouTube. Now we're going to hear, this is going to be the cross exam of Jason Mengel. Now, I don't know how you guys are feeling. If it gets to be too long and you guys want to pause and continue it tomorrow night, all you got to do is let me know. I'm totally down for that. Like I said, I got up at 4:00 this morning. And if you guys all need to find a tender place, because you need a moment and we should continue it tomorrow, just let me know. But I'm going to go ahead and play it now. Okay, here we go.
Mengel, I believe that when you were testifying yesterday, the prosecutor asked you what your current age was, right?
Hey, Nikki Rex, good to see you, babe.
Yes.
And you're now 35, 36?
April 6, 1985. I don't keep track of things.
Wait a minute. Okay, I'm going to have to stop you right there, Mr. Medic, Jason, Roger, screenshot taker, timeline maker, champion of women. Okay, you don't keep track of things. Okay, this is not like your lighter. Hey, Lechette Noir. This is not. Hey, Crackling Rosie True Crime. I don't know when you I know, Sugar Beet. I'll tell you what happened. Okay, I need this TV to sleep. Okay, and I usually fall asleep to something streaming, either YouTube or something. Well, I woke up at like 4:00 because I was hotter than 9 kinds of hell for literally no reason. Well, I had to bring my fan closer to me, and we have this thing that's right where the fan is plugged in at that boosts the signal for the Wi-Fi. Well, I guess because it was asleep, I was half asleep when I did it. I accidentally unplugged that, and then I couldn't get. Then it made the Wi-Fi go off. I had no idea that this was what happened, right? So I'm thinking, oh my God. So I'm thinking maybe I'm checking update to see if there's outages, yada, yada, yada. So by the time I do all the things, I'm awake at this point, and there was no going back to bed. I'll be all right. I'll go to bed when this is over, but because I want to hear it. But I just wanted to just point out, like, how do you not know how old you are? I don't keep track of things. I don't keep track of my lighter. I keep track of how old I am, though. I know how old I am. I know when I was born. Lord Jesus. All right, here we go. I'm already annoyed with you, Mengel.
But at the time that you met Ezra McCandless, that was in the summer of 2017, right?
Yes, I believe so.
And you were 33 years old at the time.
I don't think that math lines up.
Well, let's try and do the math, just in case I'm making a mistake, because I don't want to. All right. You were born when again?
April 6th of 1984.
Of 1984.
Yes.
So you turned 30 in 2014, right?
Yes.
Okay. So let's run it ahead 3 more years.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah,
You were 33 when you met Ezra McCandless, right?
that makes sense. Yeah.
And she was 19.
Yes.
And although the day you met her, you didn't know her age, it didn't take very long until you found out.
Yeah, a friend had C-capped her and told me.
Okay. Well, let me ask you, when you say CCAP, that's because she had changed her name, right?
I believe
She had changed her name.
she had changed it from Monica Carlson, yes.
Right. And I'm going to talk to you about that name change a little bit later. But when you met her and the two of you started this friendship, which blossomed into love, she was telling you about her life, right?
Yes.
And she had just come home from her first year of college.
I believe it was her first year in Marinette.
Marinette. Yeah, and she was studying art. You know, she was an artist.
Screen printing, yes.
She was living with her mom,
Yes.
and that was in Stanley, Wisconsin,
Yes.
which, although it's not in Eau Claire, it's certainly driving distance, meaning a person can drive back and forth between Eau Claire and Stanley easily in the same day, right?
Right.
What, 45 minutes, hour?
I never clocked it, but I would give it about that amount of time, yes.
Right, and you don't drive. I mean,
No.
you have a car that you use as a storage locker, but generally speaking, you don't drive. You're a bicycle guy.
I cycle, yeah.
Okay, so
She said
when
you
you
use
and
as a
Ezra would go
storage
places in a
locker.
car, that would be her car because your car wasn't running.
Yeah, I didn't really run it for anything.
Okay, so she had the car,
Yeah,
you had the apartment.
yeah.
And when you met her, you also met her parents eventually, right?
Yes.
And you formed a bond really with her father.
Which father are we speaking of?
I'm talking about Joe Shane Carlin.
Yes, Joe's, yep.
Joe, the man who adopted her.
Yes,
That's who she calls dad,
yes.
not a biological dad.
Negative, yeah.
Okay, she had never,
I'd never met her biological father.
she hadn't met him either, right?
As to my knowledge, no.
You met her father and you actually would confide things in her father. And by her father, I'm always referring to Joe Shane Carlin, just so we're clear, okay? You would confide in him, right?
From time to time, yeah.
You would tell him things about you and Ezra.
I would.
You would tell him concerns you had about Ezra.
I would.
And it was easy to bond with him man to man.
I mean, I bond pretty well with most people, but
But you did bond well with Joe Shane, right?
not like more than anyone else, but yes,
And he's about the same age as you.
approximately, I'm assuming.
So one thing you knew about Ezra was that she was young and impressionable, right?
I wouldn't say impressionable, but she was young.
She was vulnerable.
She wasn't vulnerable.
You are more worldly than Ezra McCandless. Wouldn't that be fair to say?
Worldly isn't in like my age, yes. Like I've lived more of a life than her, yes.
You've traveled.
I've traveled,
You've been in the military.
been in the military,
You've gone outside the state of Wisconsin.
yes.
you've not only been to the Redwoods, but to other places.
Yes.
You've been to places that for her, it's just a dream to have gone to some of those places, right?
I wouldn't say a dream. Everything's
A goal?
a goal. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, not now.
And you wanted to protect Ezra, right?
I want to protect everyone.
Well, I'm talking about your relationship with Ezra, so that's what I want to say. In general, your relationship with her, you saw yourself as protecting her.
I saw myself as protecting her. Yes.
Okay. And in fact, let me just say this. When Ezra moved back home after she left you,
Yes.
moved out of your house, there was an enormous amount of texting that went back and forth between you and her.
Yes.
Right? She didn't have a cell phone that she could just pick up her cell phone and call you and talk.
She could.
Well, she didn't have a cell phone. There was a house phone at her parents', but her mode of communication was an iPod at that time.
She
right?
could call through the text app, or she could text through the text app.
Okay, but she needed Wi-Fi to do that.
Yes.
And through the Instagram text app, there was a constant, the last few weeks of March, before everything happened here, there was a lot of texting between you and her.
Yes.
And during that texting, one of the things that you said to her on March 11th is, well, your Instagram name is the Doc Wolf,
Yes.
right?
Yep.
And you said to her, I'm a wolf protecting a fawn.
I don't recall that specifically, but if I can look at it.
That makes no sense. Wolves don't protect fawns, they eat them.
What Instagram page, Council?
I'm about to bring it over to you. That would be page 1189.
That's okay, I'll just pull it up here. Thank you.
Okay, I'm
Oh,
showing you what's been
please
marked
hold.
as Exhibit 687. The date is March 11th.
Oh, boy. Let me just rewind that just briefly to right there. Wow, Ezra. That's a hairdo, sis. Wow. Oh, I see we're switching it up. We've ditched the peach, pink-ish blazer for the black blazer. No layers today, keeping it simple. All right, Ezra, there you go.
Where are we at?
Wish I had a pen, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So like before, we read from the bottom up.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. And so if you go here to about 2/3 of the way up the page, the date is March 11th. Do you see that?
I see that.
And you are the author, the Doc Wolf.
That is
right?
me.
I'm a wolf protecting a fawn.
Hey,
Yeah,
where's
see that.
Kenny?
And then the next thing you wrote to her is, or a fox with another.
Yes.
Okay.
I don't see.
I'll just display this
Jody,
to the
but
jury. I
welcome,
moved it
Jody.
Exhibit 687.
Any objection to Exhibit 687? I would ask that it be shown in its entirety, not just an isolated message.
That's fine. I have no problem with that.
And how many pages would be the
It's
entire?
one page, page 1189.
Your Honor, I'd like to agree with you. I don't want to see just some cherry-picked screenshot. Jason Mengel, I'm looking at you. I want to see the whole conversation. Agreed.
Oh, this has to be worn up.
All right, that'll be
Warm up, excuse me.
received. 687 received.
Okay.
May
So
publish.
starting at the bottom of that page, it starts with her saying to you, that is true, right?
Whatever the context of that is.
Okay. And then there's something that's a text, but it's just a bunch of empty boxes.
Probably emojis.
What?
They're probably emojis. I think that's how they show up.
Oh, okay. So we can't really tell what those are, right?
No, negative.
And she's talking to you about making love to you. She says, I'm a garden when I'm making love to you. Right?
Yes.
That's the next thing she says. And then the next thing she says is, as cheesy and dumb as I am. Right?
Yes. Yes.
And it's after that that you say, I'm a wolf protecting a fawn,
Yes.
or a fox with another.
Yes.
And then you say to her, the first is a little odd.
What is a little?
Oh, I'm sorry. I should move the page down. My apologies.
Probably referring to the wolf protecting a fawn.
Well, it's your words.
That's what, yeah, my words are probably saying a wolf protecting a fawn is the first is probably a little odd.
Okay, nothing further. Moving 687.
It's been received.
Thank you. So let me just say something about you and protecting. You're a medic
Hey,
in
Hope
the
Cookies,
military,
good
right?
to see you.
And that means that your job is to heal people.
My job is to do no further harm. That's our credo.
Okay, we all know the first words of doctors or the Hippocratic oath is do no harm, right? Okay, but within that, do no harm, it goes more than that. It also goes to try and treat people and heal people if you can.
But it's not our job to fix people.
Your job is to fix their wounds when you're a medic in the
Fix-
military.
Fix their wounds, but people aren't like bicycles. You can't fix somebody.
Fair enough, but you can fix certain parts. Right.
You can help them and you can give them options, but it's their own choice to fix their lives or themselves.
Okay, I'm talking about wounds, like when somebody cuts themselves as a medic and they need stitches, you can stitch them up in the military,
To
right?
the best of your abilities, depending on like your care level, yes.
Okay. And you, to some extent, wanted to do that with Ezra.
I wanted to see her grow. I wanted to see, I knew she was capable of many things. So I saw potential in her, especially her art.
Okay, so you thought she was a good artist.
Yeah, I thought she was exceptional for the amount of effort she had to put in. The results were like exceptional, you know.
She was young, but she was a really good artist.
She was very good.
She was too young to go to a bar, but she was certainly a good artist, right?
Yes, yeah.
Now, sometimes when you would go with Ezra and she was driving the car, she would get very anxious. Fair?
She had, I wouldn't call it PTSD, but she had anxiety that dealt with.
Okay. You're a medic, not a psychiatrist,
No,
right?
no.
Not a psychologist, right? So it would be fair to say, with all due respect to you, sir, that you're not really in a position to diagnose post-traumatic stress disorder.
No, I'm not diagnosing.
Okay, right. That's somebody with one of those training and those degrees are the people who have to do that, right?
Yes. Could I say anxiety?
All right. You did?
Okay.
You can say whatever you want. I'm just asking questions.
Roger.
Okay.
Yes.
I mean, except for things the judge says you can't testify about. All
Within
right.
limits.
Still getting used to this.
Okay, we get that. When she would get emotional in the car and was driving, sometimes you would take over the driving, right?
At times. It wasn't safe otherwise.
Pardon me?
It wouldn't be safe otherwise.
Right, and she would say to you, I want you to take over, Jason. I don't want to drive.
Yes.
She was emotional and you would do that. You would take over and you would drive her car, right?
Yes.
Okay, so you certainly had a driver's license even though you didn't have a
Yeah,
vehicle.
I just did. I prefer not to drive.
Okay, but you would do it when she wanted you to, right?
For our safety, yes.
And that happened more than once.
I would say it was a limited amount of occasions, but it wasn't like it happened all the time when she drove.
No, it just happened when she got very emotional or there was some touchy and anxious things going on, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, let me ask you some questions about races. You'd been, when you met Ezra McCandless, you'd been part of the races crowd for quite a while, right?
I wouldn't know how long, but yeah, I was there for quite a bit.
But she was a newbie to races.
Yeah, we kind of, through our friendship, she was inducted into the crew.
Into the crew. The crew there is not uniform, right?
No.
There's differences of opinion.
Many.
And although many people are friendly, not everybody is equally friendly to each other, right?
I would say there is an amount of cattiness, but there's always respect, I guess.
Okay, so about this cattiness, I mean, the way you talked about races yesterday, you almost seemed like you were referring to it as like a family, right?
Oh, definitely.
And sometimes in families, there are tensions and people don't like each other all the time.
Yeah, but you always love each other.
And even then, people sometimes gossip, right?
Gossip.
Racy's was gossipy, wasn't it?
Yes,
There's a lot of he said, she said stuff going on there, right?
yes,
And to use an old cliche, like the game telephone, where one person repeats something to another, you know,
lost in translation.
lost in translation, not bad intent, but the facts get turned around a little bit, right?
Yes,
And sometimes people think somebody did something wrong, but they're wrong because they've just heard too much gossip. Fair enough?
fair.
Okay. And so Ezra was newer, but not everybody there. A lot of people really liked her, but not everybody. Fair?
I mean, to my knowledge, she was pretty well received.
All right. Now, yesterday you testified about things that happened with John, right?
John Hanson,
John Hanson.
yes.
Yes. And I'm going to come back to that later, but one of the things that happened after you talked to John Hanson, well, you got on the phone with him and he told you he'd never had sex with Ezra, right?
Yes,
And he went around Racy's telling that to people too.
I can't know if he did that or not, but I don't know. It just seems, I can't.
But you knew when he first told you that he had denied having sex with Ezra, right?
Yes,
And he certainly, in your opinion, didn't want to be seen as having sex with your girlfriend out in public, right?
in that first interaction, he admitted to it at the end of it, though.
At the end of it, but initially he denied it, right?
Initially, he denied it.
And you heard through Josh Trankler that he was denying it to other people too.
I believe I might have. I don't recall specifically, but
Okay. Let me ask you some questions about the abortion. I know it's a tough subject.
Trigger warning, obviously. Let me just say this. I'm going to need to back the milk truck up a little bit. I don't know if you all caught this because I was watching the chat and I haven't seen anybody bring it up, but it's a different day. Homeboy's wearing the same clothes. Ezra only owns 2 blazers and like 3 shirts, and she has mixed it up every day of this trial. What are you doing with your life, Jason? Ugh. Okay, here we go. Y'all, I don't know what he's about to say. I haven't watched this, so just trigger warning for you. All right, here we go.
Okay.
yes.
When you found out she was pregnant, that was a time of stress and turmoil in the relationship. Is that fair to say?
I wouldn't say it was stressful. It was just, it was a situation where she was having a hard time getting her footing, holding an occupation, and then she was sick. So I just wanted to know, like, how I could help.
She was sick and she had lost a lot of weight,
Yes,
right? She was vomiting every day.
yes.
Neither one of you knew why.
No, I didn't know
Right.
for sure.
It was kind of exceptional. And before she even went to the doctor, she got a home pregnancy test.
I did not know this, though.
Okay, so before she got the abortion, or about the abortion, there wasn't that much communication between the two of you about it, right?
About what?
The abortion, in advance.
Why would there be communication about?
I don't know, I can't answer questions about what happened with other people, I wasn't there. But
What I'm stating is if I didn't know she was pregnant, why would we be talking about abortions?
I'm talking about once you knew she was pregnant.
There was no conversation.
There was no conversation.
She asked for paperwork from the nurse and I shut my mouth.
She was actually under the impression that you did not want
Objection
her to
calls
have
for
the baby.
speculation. Sustained.
Mr. Mengel, in the middle of March, you were interviewed by Detective Prop, right?
I was interviewed by a lot of people, so
Okay, I'm not talking about after Alex died. I'm talking about before Alex died.
during the
Okay.
investigation, or
When, in the middle of March, after what John had done to Ezra came to light, you were interviewed by the police,
Yes.
right? And the person who interviewed you was Detective Ryan Prock,
Yes.
same detective who is sitting in court today,
Yes.
correct? I'd ask the record to reflect, and he's sitting here behind the prosecution table with a black suit.
The record will so reflect.
Okay. Oh, I wanted to reflect that he's identified, that Mr. Mengel has identified Detective Prock.
Okay, well, all right.
Thank you.
That's not
Say
quite
your
how you
understanding.
do
Yeah,
it.
I understand.
Okay, then the record will reflect he's identified him. I was just letting the record reflect that Detective Prock has been allowed to remain in court throughout the trial.
When you talked to Detective Prock, you gave him background information about your relationship with Ezra McCandless, right?
Yes.
He was asking you questions and you were giving him answers, right?
Yes.
You were filling him in on things that had happened between you and Ezra,
Yes.
about the ups and downs of your relationship with her.
Yes.
And in the course of filling him in, what you told Detective Prock is that Ezra thought for sure you
Objection
didn't
calls for
want.
speculation.
It's what
Hold on,
he's,
just stop. Ho. The follow-up question will. Okay, well, yeah, this question is, I'm not going to sustain the objection to this question, but if
but the
going down.
question's almost done, if I can just
Okay,
finish it, and there
you
is
go
no
ahead and finish
follow-up
the question.
Okay. What you told Detective Prock on that day,
I'm going to object on hearsay grounds, Judge. Sustained on hearsay.
can I have a sidebar, please?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, you need a sidebar, sis, because I didn't follow that
No.
either.
Mr. Mengel. When she had the abortion, that was traumatic to her, right?
Yes.
And I think yesterday you talked about how during the abortion, she didn't want you to be in the room, right?
Yeah, she changed her mind on the way there.
You had come in as the supportive boyfriend, right?
Yes.
But she did not want you to be a witness to this destruction of life.
Objection calls for speculation. Sustained.
You can
Judge,
ask
can we
him if
approach?
she told. Oh my gosh, this is ridiculous.
Counsel, do you want to bring VVV with you again?
This is ridiculous. I don't care if you bring VVV or XXX. The truth of the matter is, you could have asked that question. You could have asked if she told you anything, and then you could have said, "What did she tell you?" Ridiculous. Come on, lady, you were doing so good. VVV. I don't even know what VVV is. Here we go.
I can do that.
All right.
You may answer as to what.
I'm going to repeat
Go ahead,
the
rephrase the question.
Yeah, let me just do that. So Mr. Mengel, when
Oh,
you drove
thank you,
her
Hope
and
for
you said
Peace.
she
That's so
changed her
sweet
mind,
of
right?
you.
Yes.
So
I
you
appreciate
said to
it.
her, do you not want me there? You said something like that, right?
So that, yeah.
And what she said was, I don't want you to see any of this stuff.
Yes.
Okay. Now, after this abortion, which was traumatic to her, she wanted you near her, right? Not during the abortion, but in the aftermath, in the relationship.
Yeah.
You went to sleeping on the couch, right?
At times, yes.
Okay. But what you told us yesterday was when you were sleeping on the couch, she wanted you to be with her in the bed, right?
Yes.
She wanted your comfort.
Yes.
She wanted your love.
Yes.
And there were times when you felt that you needed to separate yourself from her. Fair?
Yeah. Yes.
And one of the things that you did, in fact, after this abortion, you even thought she was going through like postpartum depression over it.
We don't know, Tracy.
And you went
Just
on
somebody
this
randomly
trip to
coughs
clear your
all
head
day
with
in
your
the
friend
courtroom.
Josh Trinkler, right? And when you went with Josh Trinkler, I think you told us the whole plane route and the redwoods and how that was a great space for you, right?
Yeah.
And it could have been longer than a week that you went away, right?
I mean, with travel time, I'm not completely sure on the,
You don't have a calendar showing the exact dates, right?
no, I think I wrote it down, but I don't have an exact recollection.
Well, yesterday in court, I don't want you to take this as attacking you at all, but you just made a mistake when you said how long you were gone for military duty in February. You remembered it was 2 or 3 weeks when it was really only 9 days, February 5th to the 14th, right?
Yes.
So similarly, this trip that you took with Josh Trankler out to the redwoods, out to nature, this is kind of a spiritual reawakening for you.
Sorry, babe.
I wouldn't say
I don't know.
spiritual, is just
Personal,
personal.
fair. Could have been longer than just a week that you were gone.
It could have been.
Okay.
What's the
So,
relevance to this?
You're gone, you're in the redwoods, and she's home alone, right?
Yes.
Now, I'm going to ask you some questions about Alex, all right?
Alexander Woodworth.
Alexander Woodworth. Thank you for clarifying that. Well, you had an Alexander Zink who was your roommate, right?
Yes.
Alexander Woodworth was somebody you knew as part of the Racy's crowd.
Yes.
He was a guy who would sit in the corner reading books and writing in journals.
Often, yes.
And he was often kind of almost like a loner to himself a lot, right?
I wouldn't call him a loner.
Well, not when he was working. He was a sociable guy, but he liked to spend time with himself writing in his notebooks.
Yeah, he would have headphones and stuff in a lot. It's kind of like it's an implied task, I guess you could say, if you're at a coffee shop studying or doing some work and you have earphones and you're working on something.
He would write journals.
Often, yes.
You saw copies of those journals?
Briefly at bars from time to time, he would show me his works.
He didn't read you long passages, right?
He didn't like recite them to me, but he would let me read them.
And you found his writings very painful, right?
Well, he's a philosopher.
And he expressed what you called entropy, disorder, and pain in his writings. That was your impression.
I would say he had a specific eye for the world, and we don't always see it through the same lens. I can't really speculate.
But his writings, you're not a nihilist, right?
No,
And he was a nihilist.
I can't say that he was anything.
Well, you thought some of his writings were really brutal, didn't you?
I thought that, but I'm also not trained. I'm not like an English professor.
Right. I'm just talking about your impression. I'm not trying to get you to be a professor.
Okay.
Okay? His writings were very personal sometimes.
Yeah, they're very personal.
They were not just philosophy in the abstract like a professor would teach a class. They were about him and his feelings quite a bit, seen through the philosophy lens, right?
I don't know if he was always referring these things to himself. I don't think people always have to write about themselves.
Okay, whatever you think about what people always have to write, some of Alex's writings were personal, right? And painful.
I wouldn't know. Like I didn't ask him if these were personal memoirs. It never stated his name. Like,
Right. He didn't say, I, Alex Woodworth, believe blah, blah, blah in his journals, but he would use the word I at various times, right?
well, if you're writing a narrative, you have to have a narrator, right?
I don't know. I'm not a writer.
I'm just assuming that's how it works.
He certainly didn't tell you about anything he wrote in his journals concerning Ezra McCandless, right?
No, I had no impressions about any of that stuff.
I mean, that wasn't something he was going to share with you, right?
I would assume not, no.
And when you would read them, you would find his writings brutal and pessimistic sometimes.
When we're talking about when I viewed his writings, this is far before him and Ezra McCandless's relations. Our friendship kind of lost touch, and we weren't as there wasn't much camaraderie, I guess. We still talk. We were still respectful of each other, but he didn't reach out as much as he used to.
And in other words, he wasn't really comfortable about opening up about his life with you. Fair to say?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
Can I approach?
Yes. Okay,
How many times
Objection
is
is
this lady
overruled.
gonna approach? for
and the
Pete's
witness
sake?
may answer in the manner discussed at sidebar.
Okay, thank you, Judge. I'll repeat the question because we've probably all forgotten it by now. What you felt, you never felt like Alex was comfortable opening up with you completely about what happened in his childhood and his life. He had other friends for that, right? That's how you felt.
I think he had other confidants that were much closer, yes.
So your answer to my question is yes.
Yes.
You talked yesterday about Ezra and Alex, and what you said was you believed they both shared a painful and traumatic history with each other, right?
I wouldn't say they both shared a painful traumatic history, I guess, but
Well, that they shared their personal pain and trauma with each other. That's what you said in court yesterday, right?
I might have said that, but I can't remember.
You don't remember your exact words, but
No.
you're not denying that you said that yesterday.
No, they had
Fair.
commonality, I guess you could say.
I'm going to ask you some questions now about when Alex cut his wrists.
Yes.
All right. He cut his wrists and Ezra called you over to treat it, right?
Yeah, she might have messaged me or called me. I can't recall.
Either way,
Yeah.
she's the one who got in touch with you,
Yes.
right? And she asked you to come and help Alex because he had slit his wrist.
Yes.
You went over there and you saw the mark, right?
I believe it was
You think it was the right wrist?
I can't recall specifically. but
Okay, whichever wrist it is, the mark that he made when he slit his wrist went across his wrist, correct?
Yeah, which is uncommon for. But I'm not going to give my medical.
You're not a suicide
Yeah,
expert.
no, I'm not.
Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Your belief is that that gesture would be a cry for help, as
Yes.
opposed to actually one wanting to do away with
And I
themselves.
spoke with him about it, yes.
Okay. And when you talked to him about it, he was playing it off to you like it was an accident, right?
Yes, he said he had been.
He was drunk, a knife slipped, something like that,
He
right?
didn't realize the sharpness is what he said.
But you weren't buying that.
No.
You saw it and you're like, you knew from your training experience, this is no accident.
Judge, I'm going to
Yeah.
object. The defense counsel's made clear that he's not an expert in this area, so he shouldn't be giving an opinion on that.
It's a lay opinion.
Sustained. Well,
In your
we're not
lay
allowing
opinion.
lay opinions.
Okay, what?
We're not allowing lay opinions with respect to certain areas.
Oh, I
And,
thought that was about emotional states, not actions. But I'll move on, Judge, if you want me to.
Please,
Thank you.
thank you.
What you said to Alex, well, first of all, yesterday, I believe you described these wounds as shallow, right?
Yeah, it wasn't very far past,
You remember, you've been through, after Mr. Woodward died, you had a couple of different interviews with police officers, correct?
Correct.
And when you were interviewing, you remember talking to Investigator Dykus and Investigator Meyer?
Were they the Dunn County sheriffs?
Yes.
Yeah.
Do you remember speaking with them, even if you may not remember their names?
I remember speaking with detectives from Dunn County, yes.
And do you recall telling Investigator Dykus, when talking about this, that Alex's wound to his wrist was very deep?
Very deep?
Your words, yes.
I might have said it was in the marbling or something. I don't recall saying very deep, but
Okay, I'm gonna show you what's a transcript that's been prepared of that interview. All right? And I'm just gonna direct your attention, this is page 55.
I see this.
All right, yes. You're talking to
Yeah, I see this.
Investigator Dykus, right? And he's asking you about Alex's attempted suicide, right?
I'm sorry, Counselor, what line are you looking at?
Page, line 16. And page 55, line 16.
There are 2 interviews with the same officers. And
That's F.
Thank you.
What you said to Investigator Dykus in talking about it is because like it was very deep, correct?
That's what it says on the transcript.
You might not remember, but you know you were being recorded when you talked to him, right?
Yes.
Okay. And you were aware that Alex had like played it off to you, right? As something else, right?
He said it was,
And
excellent.
at work, he told people it was a steam wand injury from making coffee, right?
Objection calls for speculation.
Sustained.
It's not speculative, Judge. Do you
Then
want
it's
me to
hearsay.
go to
Well-
the transcript? I have an argument I can make at sidebar about its admissibility.
So is it, are you asking him about what Mr. Woodworth had said or what he had heard in terms of what other people said, Alex said?
Let me just double check, okay?
Okay.
Let me just say this. You had given Mr. Woodworth something to wrap around the wound to keep it clean, right?
Yeah, I gave him equipment to maintain it.
Right. And he went to work with that covering, right?
Objection. Again, it calls for speculation or it's hearsay.
Well, I think it's a lack of, foundation as to personal knowledge. Does he?
Did you know that he had gone to work with you had wrapped it, correct?
I had wrapped it.
You
Yes.
had given him Dermabond.
I used some kind of thing to,
Okay. And then you had wrapped it to keep it clean, right?
yes.
But important to keep a wound clean.
Yeah, I irrigated and cleaned it.
All right. And you were told, or did you know personally that he had gone to work with it wrapped up?
I had heard he was wearing a dressing, but I don't know if it was the same dressing that I
Okay.
had.
And you heard people at Racy's talk about what he said about his wound,
Then I'll
correct?
sustain on hearsay.
Thank you.
I'd like to approach.
Okay. Is sustained?
Fair to say that as far as you knew, Alex wasn't going around Racy's bragging about a suicide attempt, right?
Not to my knowledge.
And fair to say, as far as you knew, Alex wasn't going around Racy's saying, I'm having a relationship with Ezra McCandless, right?
I mean, I don't know, but I would assume he wouldn't do the same thing.
And you, however, let me just say this. After this happened, Ezra McCandless said he sliced his wrist because she wouldn't leave you for Alex. She told you that, right?
Yes, she said.
And she told you that, and you knew about Alex way before February of 2018.
What are you implying?
You knew that Alex Woodworth was having a relationship with Ezra McCandless before February when you had your encounter with him at Racy's.
I had impressions that they had become very close. I wasn't fully I had an idea that something was going on.
You had a roommate, Alex Zink, who was telling you Ezra wasn't coming home at night when you were out of town, right?
Well, she would be telling me one thing and then other
But
people.
I'm asking what Alex Zink told you. He would tell you she wasn't coming home at night, correct?
The night that she said she was at the house, he said she was not.
And in fact, what he said to you, what you talked to Detective Dykus about this, correct?
I might have, yes.
When you talked to Alex and you believed it was a suicide attempt, you said to him, look, you were telling him not to do this, right?
I asked him if he needed help, if I should call somebody,
One of the things you said to him was,
Sorry,
I'm
I
sorry.
asked him if he needed help and then he'd be arrested.
if I should call somebody or if he wanted to see.
And you said to him, look, you only get one shot at this.
Yes,
And by one shot at this, you didn't mean one shot at slitting his wrist. You meant one shot at life.
at life, yes.
Now, you talked about this with investigators Dykus and Meyer, right? You talked to them a couple of different
I
times,
talked to
right?
so many law enforcement.
It's a little hard
yes.
for you to remember
It's all-
exactly. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean this.
No, you're fine. It's all like a soup of conversations.
Okay, so in the soup of conversation, some of the soup of this conversations you had were shortly after Ezra was in the hospital and Alex Woodworth had been discovered to be deceased.
Nah, I'm here.
Before
I'm
and
just
after he
tired.
discovered, yes.
Okay. All right. And you had a conversation with these investigators on March 27th, so 5 days after you last saw Alex, right?
I'm sure I probably did.
Madam Clerk, can you turn it to my computer, thanks?
And Judge, we will mark and move to admit this later. We'll tie this up afterwards for the record.
Is he
But
state
this-
where it is?
Yes.
Yes, assuming, I
It's
believe
DO
council's going to play the audio portion of a transcript she showed me. I don't have an objection to that portion being played.
That's all we're gonna play. Okay, so just for the record, this is what the state has provided as GOJW, and we are playing from 16 minutes and 12 seconds to 17 minutes and 6 seconds. This is an interview by investigators Dykus, DICUS, and Meyer, MAYER, of Jason Mengel on March 27th.
President Flip.
Okay.
He had said that, I mean, I bandaged him up once when he slit his wrist. Okay. Because he said, if you don't leave him, I'm going to kill myself. What do you mean leave him? Was he talking about you? Okay. So, like, I went over to the house, and this was months ago, I can't remember when, but I had cleaned up his wound and bandaged him all up, and I sat and kind of talked with him about, do we need to go in and do something? Yeah. People are not going to understand that this was an act, because he said, I got drunk and I accidentally cut myself with a knife that I got for Christmas. And I was like, this is a really weird place to accidentally cut yourself. Where was that at then? On the wrist? Okay. And I was like, this is not a place you accidentally cut yourself out. Okay. And he's like, no, you have to believe me, it was just an accident. I was holding his hands. Like, I knew he was cheating on me.
No, I'm all right. I'm just tired. It's okay. I'll be fine.
I knew what was going on. Okay. Like, relationship wise. I didn't kick her out. I didn't be mean to him. Like, in public. We were still all friends. Okay. I just knew there were two people that.
It went a line beyond that.
And do you know what the time stamp was when it completed?
Mr. Nelson probably does.
Judge, I started playing it at 16:12 and I pressed pause at 17:06. I think you can see it on the screen there.
Oh, okay. Well, then that was the correct time.
Very good, thank you.
So, in other words, you're talking to investigator Dykus 5 days after Alex is gone, and you're telling him months ago you knew that she was cheating on you and you didn't kick her out.
I think at that time,
Are you sure, Sugar Beet? Are you guys sure this is okay if we continue this tomorrow night? How do y'all feel about that? Because I am kind of tired. I thought we would be, I don't know. I don't know why it took so long for that stupid video I made to upload. I just didn't want to get hit with, using somebody else's content. You know how that goes. Okay. All right. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do this tomorrow night. Absolutely. All right, you guys, thank you so much. We're absolutely going to do this tomorrow night. We'll be right here at 9 o'clock, like we always are. And I am so grateful for you guys being here tonight and going through the, the finality of the Chazzle Dazzle situation and case. And that was just, I just still can't get over the fact that he used the time that he had to speak to potentially convince the judge, who at the end of the day is the one that ultimately makes the decision, right? He used it to make it to have an infomercial instead of saying anything else. Gross. All right, you guys, I will see you tomorrow night. Sweet dreams to everybody. Happy St. Patrick's Day. We'll be back here on Friday, and we finna finish up with medic, Jason, screenshot taker, timeline maker, champion of women, evidence critiquer. Good night, you guys. All right. Bye.